in their way. The more the military stepped in the way of these two arrogant American professors who think they can do anything in the world, the more they pushed for the truth. And the more they pushed for the truth, the more the military came down on them until finally they were arrested and deported and can no longer go to Rwanda. So what is that? I'm sorry, we're talking about Rwanda and Catholics. I'm sorry, what is that? Is it a... What? Is it male or female in genitalia? I mean, come on, do you see any resemblances? Is it an accident? Is it a perfume bottle? Of course, it's just, they're just selling perfume next to the Rwandan savagery. Okay, so Kigali clerics fear refugees have been killed. Right. Right. They fear refugees have been killed. Right. Right. Modern means staying cool, calm, and directed, folks. Don't worry about those savages in Africa. Let's take off our clothes and have a little sex and sell some products here. What's for sale in this advertisement? The New York Times is an advertising delivery mechanism. It's not a news delivery mechanism. It's a corporation. It has a product. The product is selling information, but more importantly, it wouldn't exist without advertising. Newsweek, Harper's, Atlantic Monthly, they wouldn't exist without advertising. They're about advertising. It's all about the advertising. And all American media is about the advertising. National Public Radio is about the advertising. Even Democracy Now! At some level is about advertising. Who funds Democracy Now! The Ford Foundation? So anyway, I'm not really against Democracy Now! I just wish they would start telling the truth about Rwanda and Congo because they have the capacity to do so. Modern means staying cool, calm, and directed. So, let's move on. General Romeo Dallaire. All these films and books by Romeo Dallaire. The poor guy who ended up on a park bench in Canada as an alcoholic after the Rwanda genocide because he could have done something about it and he didn't. A little bit of dramatics here. I feel kind of silly, but that was what he did. He ended up as an alcoholic on a park bench in Canada until the Canadian military realized they had a problem. And they resurrected General Romeo Dallaire. They protected him when he was supposed to speak before the ICTR, and they provided him with all these contracts to create movies and sell books and et cetera, et cetera. Dallaire brought the RPF into Rwanda. Dallaire, the UN with Dallaire, brought the RPF into Rwanda. Dallaire and the UN brought the Rwandan Patriotic Front into Kigali. They made the genocide happen. If there was an organized genocide in Rwanda, General Romeo Dallaire played a part in that conspiracy to commit genocide. Because Paul Kagame had two main objectives. One, seize power. And in order to do that, he had to get as many people out of the way as possible. Not only Hutus, but Tutsis. Because the people who stayed behind in Rwanda from 1972, or worse, from 1959, were seen as the enemy because they stayed behind and they collaborated with the Hutu government. And in order to seize power from a majority government with its supporting minority Tutsi, you have to kill the enemy. And that's exactly what they did. They killed Tutsis by any means necessary, which meant infiltrating the FAR, infiltrating the Interahamwe, infiltrating rights groups, infiltrating refugee camps in Rwanda in 1994. And on April 6, 1994, people in Rwanda started fighting back. And they killed people. They were fighting for their lives. They had seen their families butchered. They'd seen their land taken from them. They'd seen their homes destroyed. The Hutu people started fighting for what they deserved, the right to exist. Because by 1994, the Hutu people had been dehumanized by the American and the Western media, and by Human Rights Watch and African Rights and Amnesty International, who always painted the Rwandan government, Habyarimana, as the enemy, as the devil, as the dictatorship, which some choose to that. But Dallaire supported all this. Samantha Power won a Pulitzer Prize for writing a book about America in the age of genocide. A Problem from Hell. Well, you know, this is an inside note, but I had a personal conversation with, I tend to appreciate Noam Chomsky, and I had a personal conversation with him about Samantha Power. And he says, well, I like to be nice to people. And I said, well, come on, tell me what you think of her politics. Let's just put it this way, he says. She's a complete fool. Samantha Power got a Pulitzer Prize because she's helping to cover up what happened in Rwanda. These people charged with genocide in Rwanda, we've been conditioned, or we were conditioned, to see every Hutu as a genocidaire. We have a Hutu man in the room who survived the process from the very beginning, from October 1990 until today, being chased and hunted and persecuted by the Rwandan Patriotic Front, even when this is even happening to Rwandans in the United States today, in Belgium, still being arrested, and people who were never involved, people who were too young, People who weren't even in the country have been charged with genocide until the government realizes suddenly that, oh, the guy wasn't even in the country in April 1994. Oh, we better change the story. So the story becomes something else. And that's the case with a professor out of Western New England College, John Marie Vianney Higuero. And these guys brought and charged with genocide are charged under a victor's justice. It's a one-sided story, like the Nuremberg trials. Really interesting book. The Man Who Invented Genocide. Check out that interesting little book. You don't see that book mentioned in any colleges. It's really interesting because who invented the genocide terminology? A Polish jurist named Raphael Lemkin. The first thing the United Nations did was to get Raphael Lemkin out of the way and gut his formulation on genocide, because if they applied it in Nuremberg, it would have applied to the Allies as well as the Nazis. And that's exactly what happened with the ICTR. It's a one-sided justice system which has never tried a single Rwandan extremist Tutsi from the Rwandan Patriotic Front for anything. Not as if they committed never committed a single crime. What the hell time is it? 8:30. Is that true? 8:45. Okay, well, I'm going to cut to the chase here. Let's see. I don't want to miss any important points. So here's Samantha Power. On September 11th, the World Trade Towers were taken out. So the Atlantic Monthly Journal article, the Atlantic Monthly article that came out in September of 2001, was eclipsed by the events of September 11th, and nobody paid any attention to it, really. But it claimed that the United States let the Rwandan tragedy happen. We let it happen. We could have done something. We knew it was going on. We let it happen. There's nothing about that that's true. There's nothing about the story that's true, and there's nothing about Samantha Power's work that's true. And the same images were reproduced over and over and over. And those were the images of the skeletons, the bodies. As if there was no history. As if there was no connection to American military power or Israel. Tutsis, Hutus, Twas in Rwanda, Congo, the Acholi people in Uganda have been brutalized by the Museveni-Kagame alliance and its backing by the Pentagon and Britain and Israel in particular. Canada is very big on the list as far as supporting these atrocities. In Rwanda today, the people forced out of Rwanda in 1994, the 1.2 to 2 million refugees who fled into Tanzania, into Zambia, into Zimbabwe, into Kenya, into Uganda, into Congo, 1.2 to 2 million people into Congo were chased and hunted all the way through Congo and butchered to the tune of 600,000 to 800,000 people who died in the forests of starvation. They died because refugee camps were bombed, because the UNHCR set up a food distribution center, and then the RPF followed the UNHCR and attacked, because they fled to as far as Gabon across the continent, escaped the entire butchery, and then when they got to Gabon, the UNHCR was waiting for them and said, there's no refugee camps in Gabon, you're going back to Rwanda. And when the report was released in October of 2010 about this supposed possible genocide in the Congo, the argument is that genocide may not be applicable to Congo with respect to the RPF, and it's not just the RPF, it's also the RPF and the Ugandan People's Defense Forces. It's Paul Kagame and Yoweri Museveni and American officials. American officials who knew exactly what was happening, who were on the ground in Congo at the time. American military, American diplomats, and American aid officials like USAID official Brian Atwood. And these guys knew what was going down. They knew that the RPF was butchering refugees. Bill Clinton knew exactly what was going on. There were U.S. Special Forces operating out of Uganda, coming in by C-130s across Uganda into the Congo. Barrick Gold was up there mining for its gold up in the north where there were no military activities. And all the time we were given the story that the refugees in the Congo were actually Interahamwe and FAR. They had committed genocide. We had already dehumanized them, so it was easy to write them off completely, and that's exactly what was done. They were left for the killing, and they were butchered all the way across the Congo. They were sent back to Rwanda, and then when they were sent back to Rwanda, they were butchered on return in Rwanda. There's plenty of examples of people's stories documenting the fact that they were forcibly repatriated. The UN report of October 2010 says that the reason that they possibly can't say that there was genocide by the RPF was that the RPF actually was taking people back to Rwanda. So if they're taking people back to Rwanda, they're taking refugees back to Rwanda and saving their lives, then of course, how could they have a nasty plan to commit genocide in the Congo? That's the argument of the UN report. It's absolute nonsense. The UN report is a complete whitewash. There isn't a single mention of a white individual or white mining company or white military operative. There isn't a single mention of white forces from Belgium, the United States, Israel, or France involved in the Congo. It's a complete whitewash. And at the same time, it's basically saying there's a possibility of genocide having been